start off, I just want you guys to turn to Romans chapter 8, verse 28. So this is one of my favorite verses ever from the Bible. Romans 8, 28. Can I get someone to read that?
And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose.
Okay, so in this verse, I think most of you know this verse, we see that God is saying that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. So, He's assuring us that everything that happens in our life, whether it's good or bad, God already knows about it. And God has a reason for everything that we go through. So, and He uses whatever we go through in our lives for our good. So, it's kind of like a movie. When we watch movies and we see how, that was such a good movie, like the way the story came together, right? But do you know that our own lives is also like a movie? And God is the director of it, right? And there's no coincidences for why things happen in our lives. Everything, just from beginning to end, the way God has put everything in our lives, the people, the circumstances, the job, wherever you're at, your family, wherever you are, everything God has put together for His purpose. So, and sometimes some awful things do happen to us, right? But even in those times, what are we doing? Are we trusting God and having faith in God? Or are you living a life of worry and fear? Right? But when we think of the bigger picture, it's easier to put our faith in Him and know that everything is happening for a reason. So I just wanted to look at this verse more closely. This verse starts with we, right? And we. Now, who are we? So we are those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose. So now His purpose for us is to enter into a personal relationship with Him, with Jesus. And so God created you and He made you for a reason. And we are those people, right? All of us, we are the people. Okay? And we have been chosen to be God's children. So we are God's children, right? And then it goes on to say, and we know. Okay? So this word means that we know. So we as children of God know that we have been called according to His purpose. So this is something that we need to know. So even going through the experiences we go through and learning from whatever we have gone through in the past, we know that. And it says, in all things. So now, this is sometimes hard to imagine because sometimes we think, is it maybe not this thing, maybe just this, but it says in all things. So in every single thing we go through, God works towards our good. So every single thing that we go through. And it says God works towards our good. So there's this person named John MacArthur, and he gives a very good example of this. So for people who know chemistry, it says that sometimes they can take a combination of two harmful products, chemicals, and they put it together, and it'll be something that's good. So by itself, it's something that's bad and harmful, but when you put it together, it becomes something that's good. So for example, salt is made of two poisons, which is sodium and chlorine. Okay? And so, in other words, God is not saying that bad things produce good results by themselves, but that God's will, so everything is working together for God's good in our lives. Okay, so now sometimes when something bad happens, it doesn't mean that a good thing happens right away. Like just, example, if you get fired from a job, it doesn't mean that right away it's going to be good. But sometimes you just have to wait, and later on you will see the reason why it happened and so on. Okay, and then it says, for the good of those who love Him. So if you love God and if you have a relationship with God, then this verse is for you. Because remember that this verse is not for everyone. It's not for the unbelievers. It's for those who love Him. Right? So, and then it says, who have been called according to His purpose. Now, what is His purpose? his purpose for us, first of all, is to save a lost world. Now you're all here and you know God and you've been saved. Why has God saved you? God has saved you because He wants you to go and bring others to His kingdom. Okay? And a second purpose for Him, for us, that He has, is to shape us into the image of Jesus. To shape us and mold us to be more like Jesus. Okay? So I just wanted to look into two stories from the Bible, look closely into two stories from the Bible and see how God clearly worked in these two people's lives. Now these are just two stories from the Bible. There's many stories in the Bible where we can see this happen, so I just chose two stories. And even as we're looking at these two stories from the Bible, I just want you to compare it to your life and see how God is working in your life as well. Okay? So we're going to start with the story of Joseph. The Joseph from the Old Testament. I don't know if you guys know the whole story. Well, most of you would know the whole story. So we see that right from the start, Joseph's brothers did not like him. Right? Joseph had a lot of brothers and they did not like him. Now why did they not like him? Because their father, liked Joseph the best. And it was very clear, right? Jacob bought Joseph a colorful coat. And he really treated Joseph like a special son. So the brothers did not like this, and they were always jealous. So, and now Joseph has this dream. To make it even worse, Joseph has this dream that all his brothers were bowing down to him. And he doesn't keep quiet about it. He goes and tells his brothers about it. And obviously the brothers got even more mad, because they're like, why are we bowing down to Joseph? And so he had two dreams where the brothers are bowing down to Joseph. And then, so the brothers had a plan to kill Joseph because they didn't like him. So what did they do? One day they threw him into a well. Okay? And then there was some some people from another country coming on their way. And so they sold Joseph to these people, right? For 20 pieces of silver. They sold Joseph, and they went and lied to their father saying that Joseph was dead. Okay. Now Joseph is sold to Potiphar. Okay, and we see that God is clearly guiding Joseph's life, right? Even the fact that he was sold into slavery, was all part of God's plan. Even at this point, it's very hard to. When you're at that point, it's very hard to think, how is God here? Because why is this happening to? Think of Joseph. He was probably thinking, why is this happening to me? Right? But God had a reason. So now everything Joseph did, he did it really well. Okay, he was a very good person. He did everything really well. And Potiphar noticed it as well. And so Potiphar put him in charge of everything that he had. So he gave Joseph a very high position. Okay? Now things are going great. And then so this is found in Genesis chapter 37 onwards. So in chapter 39, verse 6 and 7, we see that Joseph was very well built and handsome. And then Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with him. Right? And then she got him into trouble. And she made up a story. Right? She made up lies about him. And so now Potiphar got mad and sent him to prison. Right? Now, we look at this and we probably say, it's not fair. How could God let this happen to Joseph? Joseph had done nothing wrong. Right? He didn't do anything wrong. He was trying to do the right thing, but yet he's now put in prison. And it just seems unfair. Okay? Joseph should be blessed for obeying God and not punished, but yet he's punished and put in prison. Now I want you guys to see, we're going to look more into the story and see how God really does work through in Joseph's life. But I want you to understand that if Joseph had not done the right thing, then God's plan for him would not have worked out, right? So God's plan for our life does not involve us sinning or doing anything wrong, like cheating to get forward or lying to get forward. God's plan does not involve all these sins in our lives to get forward, right? You can't. That means you're taking things into your own hands. If you think that you're going to lie to get forward, or you're going to cheat to get forward, you're going to step on other people to get forward, that means you're taking things into your own hands. God's plan never involves any of these things to move forward. Okay, so Joseph, he did the right thing, right? He didn't let sin come into his life. He did the right thing, and now he's put into prison. Okay, and now Joseph was a leader. Okay, so he had a lot of faith that God would get him through anything, even when he was in prison. Okay, now it didn't take long before the keeper of the prison, he saw what Potiphar had seen in Joseph. Okay, so the leader of the prison knew that there was something special about Joseph. So he put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners. Okay, so Joseph was in charge of all the prisoners. Now, at this point, there are two high-ranking men who are imprisoned as well. They come into the prison. They're put into prison. That's Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. Okay, so they come into the prison. They're put in prison for something they did wrong. And one night in prison, both these men had dreams. Okay, both of these men, the cupbearer and the baker, had dreams. And no one could interpret these dreams. No one understood what these dreams meant. And Joseph heard about this, and Joseph went to God, and God revealed to him what these dreams meant. So Joseph went to these two people and revealed to these two people what these dreams meant, right? He tells the cupbearer that his dream meant that in 3 days, the cupbearer will be restored to his position with Pharaoh. So in 3 days, he will be out of the prison and back to his original position. Okay? And Joseph just asked one request to this cupbearer. When you go back to Pharaoh in 3 days, please remember me and put in a good word for me. Okay? And the baker also tells Joseph his dream, and that's not a good dream. So for the baker, it means in 3 days you will be hanged, and it was a bad dream. And sure enough, in 3 days, both these dreams came true. Okay, the cupbearer got his position back, went back to Pharaoh, and the baker was killed. Okay, but the cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot all about Joseph. He did not put in that good word for Joseph. So Joseph remained in prison again for 2 more years. And then, finally, Pharaoh himself has a dream. And now Pharaoh, he needs someone to interpret his dream for him. He's very troubled by his dream, and he needs someone to interpret his dream. So he got all these people, all these sorcerers and so on to come and try to interpret, and no one could understand, no one could tell what the dream meant. And finally, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. And he's like, oh yeah, I know this person in prison, and he's good at interpreting dreams. Okay, so you see how God is working through everything, just how God put everything together, like how God brought Joseph to the prison and brought this cupbearer there, and God made the cupbearer meet Joseph, and he came back out, and now he's remembering Joseph and telling Pharaoh, okay, about Joseph. So Joseph comes to meet Pharaoh. Pharaoh brings Joseph, and Joseph is able to interpret the dream because he goes to God, and God reveals to him that it means that there is going to be 7 years of, there's going to be food and everything's going to be good for 7 years. But then after the 7 years, there's going to be 7 years of famine. So there's going to be no food. Okay, so Joseph tells this to Pharaoh. And so because of that, they're able to, for the 7 years of when they have lots of food, they're able to store up food to prepare for the 7 years of no food. Okay, so because of this, Joseph is given a very high position. He's second. He comes second to Pharaoh now. Can you imagine this person was hated by his brothers, sold into slavery, and then he was put in prison, and now God has brought him and put him as the second person in charge of the country. That's pretty amazing. Joseph was nobody. He was not born into royalty. He was just one of the brothers. Okay, but now God had brought him through everything and brought him to where he is. Okay, and when 7 years of abundance was over in the country, sure enough, there was 7 years of famine. Okay, and people from all the nations nearby came to Egypt to get food because Egypt was the only country that had food because Joseph had revealed the dream Okay, so now Jacob tells remember Jacob, Joseph's father, he tells his 10 older sons to also go to Egypt to get food. Okay, so and then Jacob's brothers come and they bow down to Joseph. So do you remember? So we remember Joseph's dream from the beginning of how the brothers will bow down to him, right? And that dream came true. Okay, so God keeps His promises. So what has God promised you in your life today? Remember that if you are faithful to Him, then He will be faithful to you. If you keep following His promises and moving forward in His will, then He will keep His promises. Whatever He has promised you, He will fulfill it. Okay? And so that's the story of Joseph. And I also wanted to look at the story of Esther. So some people call the story of Esther like a Cinderella story because it was this young girl who was a nobody again, and she becomes the queen, right? So in the book of Esther, we do not see God is not mentioned at all. We don't see God mentioned, and because of that, some people think that it's a made-up story. But if you actually read the story, you see that even though God is not really mentioned, you see that God is clearly working. Like none of this could have happened if not for God. Okay, so Esther was an orphan. Okay, she was an orphan, and she was raised by her cousin Mordecai. Now there was this king in Persia, and he was giving a big feast. Okay, and he was entertaining his guests, and he calls for his queen. And his queen, she refuses to come to meet the guests. So for this king, this was a big deal because he was calling his queen and she was not coming. So it made the king really mad. So he talks to his advisors, and they decide that they're going to send the queen away, take her crown away and send her away, and she's no longer going to be queen. So she's banished from the palace, and now the king is looking for someone else to be his queen. Okay, so they gather all the young women from the country, and they bring them to the palace, and they give them beauty treatments and so on. And then they bring them one by one to meet the queen, right? Sorry, to meet the king. And Esther is also brought before the king, and out of all the women, the king chose Esther to be the queen. Now remember, Esther was just a normal girl. She was just nobody. She was an orphan, right? But God chose her to be the queen. And God didn't just choose her to be the queen for no reason, right? He had a bigger purpose. Now when Esther became queen, she just probably thought that she was just becoming a queen and that's it. But that wasn't it, right? God had a bigger reason why He chose her to come to the kingdom. Now, there was this person named Haman, and he was a very, very powerful person in the kingdom, and he always had people, he wanted people to bow down to him. So everyone, whenever they saw Haman, they would bow down to him. The only person that decided that they're not going to bow down to him was Mordecai. Remember Mordecai? That's Esther's cousin. He was a Jew, and he was like, I'm not going to bow down to Haman. Okay? So because of that, he did not like that. He was very mad. And he went to the king and asked the king if they could kill all the Jews in the country. Now the king did not know that Esther was a Jew, because Esther had kept that a secret. So now there was a decree that was sent out that all the Jews were going to be killed. Okay? So Mordecai comes to Esther and tells Esther, you need to go to the king and talk to the king about this and save your people, because all the Jews are going to be killed. Now Esther was scared. Why? Because not everyone could enter and go and see the king. So if she goes to see the king and the king says no, she will be killed. Okay? So this was a big risk she had to take to go in to see the king. Okay? But Mordecai said, I really like what Mordecai says. So if you guys turn to Esther chapter 4, verse 14, you could read that. Esther 4:14. Someone could read that.
For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance to the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?
Okay, so Mordecai says, who knows that you've come to this royal position for such a time as this? So what if God had brought you from where you are and made you the queen for such a time as this, right? And Esther knew that that's why she had been brought here. That's why she had become queen, because God had a bigger purpose for her life. And so she fasts and prays for 3 days, and she goes with courage to see the king. Remember, the king could say no and could have her killed, but what happens? The king welcomes her, and the king even offers half his kingdom for her wishes. Okay? So, and all she asked was that the king and Haman, the guy that wants to kill the Jews, join her for dinner that night. And they go for dinner, and then again she asks if they could have dinner again the next night. So they have dinner again the next night. And that's that same night, after the first night, the king could not sleep. Okay, so for some reason he could not sleep. So he wanted his servants to bring in the book that has all the chronicles written of what has happened in the past few years. And when the king was reading through this book at night, and he turned to this page that has something that Mordecai had done for him. Mordecai, Esther's cousin, had once helped to save the king's life. And the king asked his servants, did anyone do anything to reward Mordecai? And the king's attendants told him that nothing had been done for Mordecai. Okay? And so, the next morning, the king, what he does, he plans like a big thing to honor Mordecai, right? He brings him and he puts him in royal robes, and he just honors him. And then the second night, when Esther meets with Haman and the king, Esther is able to tell the king everything that Haman was planning to do. And now the king had also remembered Mordecai now too. So he knows what Mordecai had done for him, and he realizes that Mordecai is a Jew and that Haman wants to kill all the Jews. And so the king hangs Haman instead. So Haman is killed instead. Okay, and so because of this, all the Jews' lives were saved. Okay, so why did God bring Esther into the kingdom again? Because to save the Jews' lives. Okay, so we see in these two stories of the Bible that God clearly had a purpose for Joseph, and he had a purpose for Esther. And he made everything work together in such a beautiful way, and to fulfill his purpose. Now, he had a reason for making Joseph go through everything he went through. Joseph went through so many hard times, right? Everything wasn't easy. He was sitting in prison. He was a slave. He went through so many hard times, but God put it all together to bring him into the high position that he brought him into. And he had a reason that he brought Esther to the kingdom to become a queen. Okay, so I want to share something that happened in my life as well. Something that God spoke to me a month or so ago about something that He was doing in my life. So, as you know, Johnny and I got married in 2011, and one of the biggest challenges we faced was getting our own place. No matter what, we just kept finding it really hard to be ready financially to have our own place. And we struggled with this for 4.5 years. Now Johnny's parents were really nice to let us stay in their house. They said we can stay no matter how long we want and so on. But we just wanted our own place. So for those 4.5 years, they were a challenge for us in that area. And many times we wondered if we would ever be able to get our own place because it just seemed like it would never work out. And then in the beginning of this year, it was in March, it was very, very obvious to us that God wanted us to get our own place. And we got so many confirmations that this was the time for us to finally move out. And there was just so many confirmations. We just knew it, and we knew it from God. And everything was good. We got our own place and everything, we moved out. But I still had this question at the back of my mind. Why did God make us wait for 4 years? Why couldn't He have given us our own place like a few years back or as soon as we got married? Why did He make us wait for 4.5 years? And so about 2 months ago, I actually asked God this question. I was like, why was there a reason that you made us wait? Okay? And God spoke to me clearly and gave me an answer. So God reminded me of our prayers and promises to Him while we were waiting for those 4.5 years. So you see, the more we waited and waited for those 4.5 years, the more Johnny and I promised God that when we do get our own place, that we would use it for His ministry. And we promised God that we would use it for our youth ministry. So, see, if we had gotten a place before, we would have not had that time to make all these promises to God. And so, I felt God asking me very clearly, do you think that you would have sacrificed your home for my ministry like you do now if I had given it to you when you first got married or somewhere soon after? And I knew my answer was no. And I knew that in preparation, in those 4.5 years, as we just waited for our own place, we just knew that when we get it, we would appreciate it so much that we would know that we want to give it to God's ministry. And God clearly told me that it was because of that He made us wait that long. Because He knew that when He gave us our own place, we would use it for His ministry. And that only could have happened because of that waiting for that 4 years and the promises we made to God in waiting for those 4 years. And God reminded me of the story of Anna. We see the story of Anna, and how she was waiting for many years to have a child. And because of waiting for those many years for the child, she went to the Lord and promised the Lord that when she finally has a son, if God gave her a son, she would give him back to the Lord and let him live in serving the Lord all the days of his life. Now, if Anna had gotten Samuel, she finally got Samuel, and she did this. She gave him to God, right? If Anna had gotten Samuel, like when she first got married or something, would she have made that promise? No, she wouldn't have made that promise. So just because she had to wait all those years, right? She made that promise to God. When I finally if you give me a son, I will give the son for your kingdom. And we see Samuel, he was such a great prophet. He grew up and he even heard God when he was a child, right? And then he grew up and he was the one that anointed King David as king. He was such a powerful prophet in the Bible we see. And if Hannah hadn't promised this, and if Hannah hadn't given Samuel up for his kingdom, for God's kingdom, even from a young age, then all this wouldn't have happened. And it's because of that wait that Anna was able to promise God that she would do this for him. So just like that, God was telling me that in that wait, in those 4.5 years that you waited, I was preparing you guys for what was to come when you get your own place. And so, see, God just makes everything work together for good. Like whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that's going on in your life, if you do love God and you're faithful to Him, He's making everything. He's doing the work. He's doing the works. And even if it may seem like it's like a dead end, or it's like nothing's going to happen and nothing's going to work out, just know that God is doing something. He has a reason for everything. You've been placed in your school, your workplace, your home for a reason. Nothing is a coincidence. There's no coincidences with God. Nothing is an accident. Just remember that God is working through everything that you're going through. Okay. Can we stand? So I just want you guys to close your eyes. And just think about, what are you complaining about today? Now, instead of complaining about that, why not trust God that there is a bigger purpose for what you're going through? God has a purpose for your life, and He's taking you through things to get you there. You are where you are for a reason, right? Just like we saw in the life of Joseph and the life of Esther, God has a bigger purpose for every one of us. I just felt like while we were singing the song, "You Are Faithful," and Salome was singing the bridge part, "Always You're With Me, Your Hand Will Lift Me, my trust is in Your name." I just felt like there were some people here, like, you were just finding it so hard to sing that part, because you're just like, I don't know if I can trust God. I'm just looking at everything that I'm going through, and I just don't know if I can really trust God with everything that I'm going through. But God is saying, just trust me. Just trust me. Whatever it is that you're going through, just give it into my hands, and just know that I'm working behind the scenes. I'm the director of your life. I'm the director of your story, and I'm doing something with your life. So just trust me. So just spend some time just telling God that you trust Him with your life. Just open your mouth and just tell Him that you trust Him with your life. I'm just going to ask Johnny to come pray for us.